Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to the Infusing Humor into Your Meetings panel. I'm very honored to be moderating this panel. For those who don't know me, I am Brian Thrasher, president of the Dell Master Speakers Club in our district. I discovered firsthand the importance of humor in Toastmasters when I became president, because I became president of a corporate club. And I think corporate clubs have a reputation for being a bit more stuffy than maybe some of the community clubs. And I would say that our club was probably in decline. We were facing guests who didn't want to join and old members who were frequently heading for the door. And I realized that we needed to make our clubs more fun to differentiate them from all the other boring business meetings that people were doing on Zoom every day, because our meetings were also on Zoom. And so it just sort of added to that Zoom fatigue. And so I set out to make it more fun, and I used humor to do that. And I infused humor in a few different ways, but the most important was leading by example, because if the president of the club wasn't willing to be vulnerable and wasn't willing to be a clown, how would anyone else be willing to loosen up in that sort of culture? Now, I tried a lot of different ways, but the most important was I sprinkled in humor whenever I had a role and whenever I gave a speech. And so just one example of that, I gave a speech on misinformation. And so this could have been a very boring, dry speech about facts and citations. And it did have facts and citations, but I also made sure to include some not quite true facts in it. And then when the audience least expected it, this happened. My fake news alarm went off, and they were not expecting it. And my character presenting didn't expect it either and sort of panicked over it. And that elicited some chuckles. It might not have been laugh out loud funny for everyone, but it did bring people back into my speech. They were engaged. They wanted to hear how it ended. They needed to hear my conclusion and find out what else they might have been missing. And that's the power of misdirection. That's the power of surprise. That's the power of humor. Humor can get people interested in your message, and more generally, it can make our Toastmasters meetings more fun. But you didn't come here to hear me talk about humor. You came here to hear from our three distinguished guests. I'm just your Toastmaster taskmaster, here to make sure that the meeting runs on time. So our three guests today are Luisa Montalvo, second place World Championship of Public Speaking winner, Rich Bassemir, president of the Laughing Matters Club, a humor-focused club in our district, and Jim Comer, an experienced comedy writer in his own right. Each one will give a presentation for 10 to 12 minutes about how you can infuse humor into your meetings. And once all three have gone, we will have a Q&A session. So please feel free to start thinking about what questions you want to ask, leave them in the chat. We'll address those at the end. And I want to make sure we have as much time for Q&A as possible. So without further ado, let's turn to our first speaker. Luisa Montalvo originally joined Toastmasters in 1987 and was a member for 3 years. She later rejoined in 2013 and has been a member ever since. Her home club is Hub City Toastmasters, but she is also a charter member of Alpha Toastmasters. She is mentored by Phyllis Allen, and she has helped her branch out into leadership roles in the Rio Grande Valley. Luisa loves to compete and is placed in various contests at the district level. In 2019, she competed in the International Speech Contest, where she placed second at the World Competition in Denver, Colorado. In her spare time, she's dedicated herself to fostering and transporting shelter dogs and homeless dogs from the Rio Grande Valley. Please welcome Luisa Montalvo.
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Yes, excellent. All right. Before I start, does anybody here have alopecia? No, we're good? Everybody's good? Okay. All right, great. In case you are wondering why I've got this background, it's because if you haven't heard, I was in a pretty serious car accident about 2 months ago. And I will start walking hopefully next month. And I had to ask myself, how desperate are we if we're asking people in a hospital to do Zoom meetings. But, some of you really need to start stepping it up on your humor. I can't always be there for you, but nonetheless, in between diaper changes and medicine, I'm here for you today. So here we go. It's the weekend. I'm excited about that because on the weekends, I don't have to go to physical therapy. I don't have any rehab of any kind. Excuse me, nurse, I'll need another vodka. Thank you. So anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about, and something that was stressed by Bart, was the fact that he wants to know how we infuse humor into our meetings. You have so many different roles and so many different aspects that you can do this with. Now, the beauty of this right now, and this is hopefully going to end soon, is that with Zoom, there's so many things you can do. Just so many things you can do to make people laugh. You can do anything with the lighting. You can be up front. You can be loud. You can do anything you want because this is a camera and you're being on camera. So try and express that and go with that for one tip. When he said, what can we do in our meetings to make it funny or to infuse humor? We have to realize that humor is actually taking some of our most embarrassing moments and making them laughable. People will want to laugh at you, and then they'll want to laugh with you. First, most importantly, they're going to want to laugh at you. That's easier to do than anything. Don't ever attack your audience because of the way they are or how they are, because nobody wants to be attacked. People want to laugh at other stuff, not look at themselves. So when he said, how can we make the meeting funny? What we do sometimes is, and what I've noticed is, if I am chosen as the table topics master, I don't go with questions like, what life mistakes have you made? No, nobody wants to talk about that. And the problem is that if you start a meeting on a serious note, it can sometimes get stuck there. And we don't want that. This is Toastmasters. You can say anything, you can do anything, just like he was saying. It was fake news. This doesn't have to be an actual rehab where we discuss all our problems. No, this is the time to have fun. This is the time to do anything and say anything you want, and it doesn't have to be 100% true. So you take your table topics master. Now, when I'm table topics master, I'm going to choose funny questions. And when you start the first person giving a funny response, hopefully they give a funny response. If they don't, as table topics master, you have the ability to come in and give a 30-second comment and try to bring the mood back up to humorous. If they get off on a tangent and talk about how their brother died of COVID, well, that brings the whole meeting down through the atmosphere of it. Once you start that, other speakers following that are going to want to do exactly the same thing. Then it kind of, without knowing, subconsciously becomes a competition of like, oh, wait, I've had something happen to me too. My dog died yesterday. Maybe I should talk about that. And with that, your whole meeting starts to decline in what the whole atmosphere has been set at. So as table topics master, you get to choose funny questions to make it ridiculous. And you can even start off by something that you thought was that happened to you that was funny, and that will start your whole meeting off in a progression of hopefully being funny. Now, you can also start a meeting, and as Toastmaster, you can say, we're going to introduce all the people that have roles in this meeting. However, when I introduce you, the first thing you need to do is give us a joke or tell us something funny that happened to you today. Well, you have what, 5, 6, 7 roles in the meeting? So now you've got 5, 6, or 7 jokes that are coming at you. And this is great. Why? Because it changes, like I said, the whole atmosphere of the meeting. Now, Bart asked me for 3 different things what I would like to do and say to you to share with you. So 1, if you're the table topics master, go ahead, choose funny jokes. If you see a decline in how the meeting is going, you have that 30-second golden opportunity to change the whole meeting around to make it funny. 2, if you're the Toastmaster, before you introduce all the dignitaries and let them know beforehand, don't surprise them because then you're going to get really bad jokes. So go ahead and let them know the week before. When I introduce you, I'm going to ask you to give us a joke. That starts the meeting on 7 different jokes, which is great. 3, guess what? I don't have a 3. That's the whole funny thing. You can say all you want. Bart, I'm sorry. I could only come up with 2. Okay. So I have failed you there. Now, I know that in the beginning, and again, I'm limited here because I'm in a hospital, but it was kind of a show different hats, the different hats that a Toastmaster could wear. So unfortunately, this is all I have for right now. So this is what I'm going with. But I really, really think that it's important to use humor in your meeting. Try to take the, again, most embarrassing thing that happened to you and make that funny. I just mentioned earlier, between diapers and medications, I'm so embarrassed to let you know, I to go and use the restroom. So guess what? I am, yes, in diapers. Luckily, I've worn the same hospital gown to the last 7 Toastmaster meetings. So I don't have to worry about what attire I'm going to wear. I don't have to worry about any of that. So in a way, this is really good. You see, this is one of my most embarrassing things. And hopefully I'm making you laugh about it. Now, Bart did also say, we only had 10 to 12 minutes to share all these things with you. I hope some of these ideas that I've shared with you have given you a little light, a little way to make your meetings funnier. So with this, I'll turn it back over to our mediator. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon, literally in person, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Luisa. That was great. I really liked, I liked all of it. I liked how I've heard some of those messages from you before in previous panel discussions, but one thing I really wanted to comment on is the way you even presented your content was humorous here, where you were willing to, again, be sort of a clown and be the one who's embarrassed putting the thing on your head, the mask, and that makes it so that everyone else can feel more comfortable moving in that direction in the meeting, because by being more extreme, that immediately sets the tone and allows for slack for people who are maybe shyer about that sort of thing. And I also liked how you used a rule of 3 joke by not having a 3rd item. That was a nice twist on that. All right, we are going to go ahead and move into our second speaker now, and that is Rich Bassemir. Rich Bassemir has been in Toastmasters since 2001 and is still learning and enjoying the Toastmaster community. During his journey to becoming a distinguished Toastmaster, Rich has held just about every club role multiple times, including area governor, and he's competed in multiple competitions. Rich has always been fascinated with how humor is used. He's currently the president of Laughing Matters, a club that focuses on bringing humor to meetings and speeches. Rich will share some ideas for humor that have worked for him that you may find useful in your own club. Please welcome Rich Bassemir.
I guess it helps if I take myself off of mute so you can hear my message, and we're not all lip readers. I think we'll all agree that being able to add humor into our meetings increases not just the learning activity, but it makes it fun. And with that, you're going to retain members and you're going to attract the guests because you're having fun. Now, like Brian, I graduated from Virginia Tech with an electrical engineering degree. I was an engineer. How boring is that? And I could so relate to Brian. I would go to these technical presentations and they would talk about facts and numbers and technical stuff that was so dry. But every once in a while, there'd be a presentator that would mix humor with his topic. And that presentator usually had a huge crowd. And so you walked away with the message and you had fun learning it. I love the example that Brian had used with the fun facts. And it also reinforces what Luisa has mentioned with the Zoom background that we have the ability to do that, which we couldn't do standing up. But let me talk to you about 5 things. Oh, Luisa, I thought Bert told me to come up with 5. You got off with just 3. He's picking on me. But I have 5 things that I wanted to share with you that I find were valuable to me. The first one is to know your audience. Now, this applies to speeches, but it also applies to your club. You really want to know your club. I was in the IBM club, and it was a corporate club, a very technical club. And I was fascinated that I could give the same speech to that club. And then I'd go as a member of Arthur Storr Toastmasters Club at the same time. I'd go over there and get a totally different reaction from things that I said. So take a look at your club and see, are there things that the club has in common that you might be able to make fun of or poke fun of? It might be the food in the cafeteria if you're in a corporate club. It could be traffic to get there. It could be the weather. Just take a step back and think about your club and what types of things does your club laugh about, if at all? Sometimes there's different cultures in the club, and a joke that you think is really funny, other members don't get it because they haven't been around. My sister came down from Boston, and I took her to Esther Follies. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Esther's Follies in downtown Austin. And I had a great time. It was hysterical. But there were parts of it where they talked about Texas humor that went right over my sister's head. She didn't laugh. So think about, my first piece of advice is, take a step back and think about your club and what makes them laugh. Listen to things that happen in that meeting, and I'll say, take notes or something and say, oh, this really resonates with the club. And from that, you may be able to build on stuff. My second tip is to plan ahead. Like Brian, he planned ahead with his fake news. And like Luisa had mentioned, sometimes you can have props, so you can plan ahead. David, his name escapes me now, David Brooks. He had once said to write out every speech because what is written can be edited. Well, you can't write out necessarily what you're going to do at Toastmasters, but you can plan ahead. And the simple example that's already been used is the rule of 3. Most of us know the rule of 3, where you go 1, 2, and the third item is unexpected. Like I was going to go camping in the Yosemite Park. I took my tent, I took my stove, I took my mother. So if you're planning a meeting, or if you're a Toastmaster, look for things or threads where you could, and that's one of the easiest things to inject humor, is to use that rule of 3 and interject that. Let's see, I wrote some other notes down here. A lot of times, or hopefully a lot of times, there is a theme for your meeting. The Toastmaster will announce the theme. Well, that's a perfect opportunity, if you have a role, to think about the theme. Maybe you can think about a joke that's related to the theme. Maybe you can relate to a story that's around the theme. And so you're able to plan ahead. So when it's your time to be the timer or the table topics, or even if you're doing an evaluation, if you want to enter with a very quick quip or joke, the grammarian, whatever, it's an opportunity to think about some joke or some funny story that would apply to the theme of the meeting. The word of the day is another one. It's a lot of times the word of the day will be announced, and when it's your turn to talk, or you can think about things, how you might make that funny. There was a word of the day one time, it was called infer, to imply something. And so when it was time to talk, you could say, well, I left my jacket at home when I was a kid, and when I got home, I knew I was in for a reprimand. Okay, so, play off words like that, and you can think of things. Sometimes it's just mispronouncing the word. Maybe it's using it in the wrong context, but it's funny. And it's something that you can consider doing and thinking or planning ahead. So when it's you're trying to talk. The third item I have is to keep a humor journal. Now, I've heard multiple people talk about comedians will do this is they have a little notepad, or sometimes it's like a book. Where's mine? I always keep it handy. And if there's funny stories or something like that, I'll write them down. Now, why do you write that down? Is because I'll forget it, for one, if I don't write it down. And two, if there's a theme about relationships or first dates or something, I may flip through there and see if I can remember some of the stories. Real quick, one of my favorite was when I was at school, Virginia Tech, it was back in '77, a girl walked into the cafeteria with a t-shirt that said, "Kiss me, I give green stamps." Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to know what green stamps were, but back in the 60s and maybe into the 70s, you collect these stamps, you put them into a book, and when you have multiple books, you could go and turn these books into a redemption center and get a mixer or record player or some kind of household item. Well, this girl was wearing a shirt that said, "Kiss me, I give green stamps." I'm sitting with a bunch of guys, the word starts saying, "Hey, I'll give you $5 if you go over and kiss her." Another guy says, "I'll give you $5 if you go over and kiss her." It got up to $20. Now, $20 may not sound like a lot to you guys, but back when I was going to school, that would buy 3 tanks of gas. And I thought, what the heck? And so I walked up behind her. I reached around to give her a peck on the cheek. She screamed. She threw up her tray of food. I remember pulling the jacket over my head and walking out. Well, the rest of the story is I ended up marrying that girl. And then 25 years later, I traded her in for a toaster. So you see, this is where you can take a story and twist it to add some humor. And I also took some liberties there. I really did marry her, but it fit the story, and it was something that came out of my humor book. So if you have a table topics or something like that or a theme, and you want to be prepared for table topics, that'd be something that you could do ahead of time to kind of think of, okay, how could I infuse some humor in the table topics and hopefully make people laugh and not have to rely on your table topic master like Luisa to bring the audience back up again because you've been a real downer. Okay. So that's the other thing I had, is to keep this humor journal. The fourth item is to be observant. All right. You want to listen to what's happening and use something called a callback. For example, hold on. I'm going to have my chocolate milk now. Luisa had done a gag that got a reaction with the vodka. So if you hear something that goes on in the meeting, use this callback technique, because the audience already laughed about that. How can I build on that? How can I replay that? Another quick story, Darren LaCroix told a story, if you've ever seen his award-winning speech where he falls on the floor, face down on the floor. Well, he had given that same speech at another event or whatever, and he had gone to the other event the night before just to watch and see how the audience reacted. And they had some horse show. I know I don't remember all the details, but I do remember, as he told the story, the horse had an accident there on the stage and they had to come and clean it up. Well, the following morning, when he did his presentation, he fell on the floor like he usually does. And he looked up and, "Is there a horse been around here?" So it's a technique where your callback, he was observant, he was there the night before, registered and worked it into a speech. So when you're in your Toastmasters meetings, if something's funny said, somebody does something funny, that might be an opportunity for you to build on something that has already worked. People already laughed at that. It's like a freebie if you can just work it into whatever you're doing. The fourth thing I have, and I think it was Brian had mentioned this too, is you got to be enthusiastic. You got to have fun with this. All right. Not all humor is going to work. Some stuff is going to fall flat. Sometimes, even in Laughing Matters, we cross the line and do something that might be considered a little inappropriate, but it's a playground to experiment with humor. And it's important to be observant and watch to see what people are doing, saying, and reacting to that. I could talk more about this. Let me leave on this. If you don't have a humorist in your Toastmaster roles, put in a humorist. Have somebody open up with a joke. It's so valuable to do. At Laughing Matters, we also actually had another role called a comedy commentator, where the person's purpose is just come in and talk about something funny, something they thought was funny, something they heard. Sometimes we've even played a short video from Steve Martin or things like that, all to elevate the mood and get everybody excited about the meeting. Go out there, have fun with your meetings, look for opportunities to use that rule of three. It's an easy rule to do, and let everybody laugh. Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Rich. Another great speech with a lot to learn from. I noticed that with the idea of the callback, you can also call back not just to things within the meeting, but also in topical news. And I noticed Luisa did that earlier with the alopecia joke, referring to the Will Smith, Chris Rock controversy from a couple weeks ago. That's another great something that's already existing in the current zeitgeist. Doing a callback to that is just as appropriate as something earlier in the meeting. So that's a great way to immediately get people laughing and involved in what you're doing, because you know they've already heard about it. All right, now for our third speaker, Jim Comer. Jim Comer is a writer and speaker who agrees with Robin Williams when he said, "Comedy is acting out optimism." Jim wrote his first skit about a food fight in high school and graduated to writing jokes for Joan Rivers for a princely $7 a line. He was hired to punch up a failing Broadway comedy and got 42 laugh lines into the show before it closed on opening night. He is proudest of writing a book about caregiving, When Roles Reverse, that shares true stories that help readers laugh out loud at a subject too often clothed in sadness. Jim believes that humor is one of God's greatest gifts to humankind, right up there along with chocolate-covered strawberries and wrinkle-free shirts. Please welcome Jim Comer.
Thank you, Brian. I have to stand for my thing. I'm not good at sitting and talking. First, I just want to say it's so good to see Luisa as part of this panel. I had the privilege of competing against her at district 3 years ago. And when she finished her speech, I said to myself, Jim, you're not going to regionals this year. Today, I'm going to talk to you about just two things. I'm going to talk to you about one of the happiest nights of my life. And sadly, it has nothing to do with my love life. I was 33 years old. I had quit being an actor, and I had taken my first corporate job writing sales meetings for Avon products. And these meetings were every month, and they went to the 3,000 district managers all across the country who had monthly meetings for the 500,000 Avon ladies. And I wrote these meetings for 2 years, and I knew these district managers. They were like my mother times 3,000. So then I was promoted up to writing speeches for the executives. And they announced that they were going to have a giant conference. They were going to bring all 3,000 district managers in one place into Atlanta for 3 days. Big, giant deal. And then they said they were going to bring in Bob Hope, the most famous comedian of the 20th century with a 70-year career. They were bringing in Bob Hope to entertain at a black tie event. And I was really impressed. So one night I'd gone to about 2 weeks before the event. I'd gone to bed, I was sound asleep, and about 4 a.m., I woke up and I said to myself, Bob Hope, I've read that he loves to do in-jokes, material about whatever group he's talking to. And I know this group. I got out of my bed, got a folder, and I started writing jokes about these district managers, about the things that upset them, about their issues, about all the real stuff in their lives that could be funny, and especially their hot buttons, the stuff they really cared about. And about 3 hours later, I had 13 or 14 jokes, and I thought they were pretty good. Then the question came, how do I get these jokes to Bob Hope, who I knew wanted to have stuff like that? Well, I was flown down to Atlanta because I was writing speeches. And on the day of the big event, I had my jokes. I went to the vice president of conferences, who was really cool. And I told her what I wanted to do. I showed her the jokes. She approved them. And she said, we're not telling any of the other executives. So she and I put the jokes on the teleprompter. So when Bob showed up for his dress rehearsal, there were my 12 jokes. And I explained to Mr. Hope what was going on. He took a look at him. He looked at each joke and he said, I don't understand. I don't get it. I went, oh no. He said, but then this kind man said, young man, he said to me back when I was still young, he said, I want you to come with me back to my suite, and I want you to go over each joke with me and explain why it's funny. In other words, I am going to tell Bob Hope what's funny. Well, I did exactly what he said. We went back to the suite, we sat down, and we went over every joke. And he still didn't get them. They were just such in jokes, he couldn't comprehend them. And then he said a very kind thing. He said, I'll do one joke. And if it gets a big laugh, I'll do the whole monologue. And I said, okay, do the first joke, because it's about the company car, and the managers hate their company car. It's a Chevrolet Chevette, and it's not big enough to get their display in it. And I know that the management is replacing the car the next morning. He said, okay. And so I am holding my breath. We get to the big night. He's there. He comes out, and I had given him an apron that said, I'd rather be selling Avon. And it got a laugh when he walked out. So that made me feel a little better. I held my breath. Here's the joke he told. He said, it is great being here with you at Avon. They are treating me like a king. The CEO met me at the airport in a chauffeur-driven Chevette. Well, he said that. Those ladies screamed and beat the floor. It ricocheted. They laughed for 20 seconds. And I looked at Bob's face, and he was kind of going, he had no idea what he said was funny. And then he proceeded to do just what he had promised me he would do. He did the entire monologue. And it was laugh after laugh after laugh, because the ladies were hearing their issues, what was important to them. And of course, when he finished to a roaring applause, I was thinking to myself, Bob is going to invite me out to California to be one of his joke writers. Well, you and I both know that didn't happen. But what did happen, what I learned from that, is not only did it get the laughs, which were wonderful, but it also had a subterranean impact. Subliminally, those ladies were saying to themselves, Bob Hope knows who I am. He knows my problems. He knows my troubles. He knows what drives me crazy. I'm important. So it hit them on two levels. And that's something we can learn from. Because as speakers, if you go into a corporation, an association, any group, anywhere, if you take the time to do your homework, find somebody there who can help you, and get information about what's going on in the organization. What are the problems? What are the issues? What's funny thing has just happened? Well, find out all you can about the group, especially anything that might be, a little prickly that's going on right now. And then try to write some material that acknowledges those things. Now, of course, you're going to run this by management, so you don't say anything you shouldn't have said, but they're going to love you if you will acknowledge them in your material. First of all, they know you did your homework. Second, it makes them feel important. And third, you're going to get laughs where you never thought their laughs would be. It is an absolutely important thing to do to make the audience feel that you know who they are. That's my one story. Second story, back when I first started being a speechwriter and speech coach, I came up with this idea, I just from observation, I called it ATO, acknowledge the obvious. In other words, whatever is happening in the room or in the country, like with the Academy Awards, certainly that was an ATO for the entire country, and at least Luisa mentioned that. But I especially want you to focus on what's going on in the room. Because here's what I can guarantee you. If you speak very often, eventually terrible, unexpected things will happen. I guarantee you that. I mean, power will fail, sound systems will sputter, the slides won't show up, or they'll show up upside down. Fire drills will go off. There'll be an automobile accident right outside the window. Everything that can happen will happen, including, and this happened to me 10 years ago, a woman went into labor on the 3rd row. That's right. And I had to, of course, I wasn't using humor then. I made sure that we got the EMT there. She was cared for and she was ushered onto the hospital. But things will happen. It's so important that as a speaker, whatever happens, you need to instantly acknowledge it, go for it. For example, let's say that you're making your most important point of your whole speech. Everything is led up to this point. You're right in the middle of this big point. And suddenly, somehow, a dog wanders into the room. I don't know how I got there, but a dog wanders in. I saw this happen at a church once. Dog comes in. Where do you think every eye in the room is? I assure you, it is not on you. It is on the dog. And if you don't stop what you're doing instantly and acknowledge the dog, you look like an idiot. So here's what you should do. Something like that happens. You see the dog, you go, oh, look, we got a new visitor. Even dogs want to learn about presentation skill. And you get down, you pet the dog, you be as friendly and kind and loving to that dog as you can be. Even if you don't feel that way, you've got to act great toward the dog. And then you get the eye of one of your buddies there. You say, you know, this dog looks a little thirsty to me. Would you take him to get some water? And you kindly, gently have the dog let off. Nice to have you with us. So glad you came. And if you can think of funny things to say, good. But you don't even have to be funny. You just have to be. You have to be real. You have to play the cards that are dealt you. And in that case, you were dealt the dog. So you need to have fun with the dog. And the audience, I assure you, at the end of that day, whether they remember anything you said or not, here's what I know they'll remember. They're going to remember how you treated the dog. And if you treated the dog well, if you had some fun with it, if you had a little humor with it, they're going to love you. But if you didn't acknowledge the dog, you'll look like an idiot. And if you look like you were upset by the dog, they will hate you forever. Let me show you an example of what one of these acknowledge the obvious things happened to me about 15 years ago. I'm in California, land of warmth, and they decided we'd have my speech in an amphitheater outside. And I thought, fine, that's good, it'll be great. 200 people outside, and right before I go on, they say, Jim, the sound system isn't working. I say, that's no problem. I was an actor. I can speak loudly, no problem. And in my best actor voice, I go on and I start my speech, and I'm doing good. We're fine. They can hear me. And about, 15 minutes into my speech, the El Toro Marine Base air show dress rehearsal started up above. It was deafening. And I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it at the same time the audience is experiencing it, and they know what's happening. They're on my side. So I had to just have fun with it. So what I did, I ducked down. When they would come over, I would act it out. I would pretend like I'm hiding, and they started laughing. And then when in between planes, I gave my talk. And then when they came down, I ducked again. And so we got through the whole speech between planes. And I acknowledged what was happening with my body. And when it was all over, more people came up to me and congratulated, not on my brilliant speech. No, they congratulated me on how I handled the planes. And that's what they're going to remember. So sometimes you just want to get through it with warmth and humor and reality. I don't know how much time I've got left. I'm going to end with one thing. Especially today, when people are so super sensitive, if you are making, you have some material you're writing, and you're making a joke about something, if you have any doubt as to whether that material could be offensive or could go over the line, when in doubt, don't use it. If you have any question, go to something else. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. And that actually is a good transition into our Q&A. And I want to give everyone in the audience a chance to ask their questions, but I want to start us off with a question that's related to what Jim just covered at the end there about potentially offensive material, especially in a Toastmasters context. I think probably one of the biggest fears of Toastmasters, and one of the reasons they don't engage in humor, is they're worried about offending others. And that's doubly so in a corporate club like the one I'm in. So I wanted to hear from the panel on what they think can be done to ease concerns, or where the line should be, or that sort of thing, for what humor is appropriate in a Toastmaster setting and what is too far, and how do we help our Toastmasters clubs move farther into humor without going too far.
Brian,
Rich?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'll go ahead real quickly comment, because it was not too long ago we had some material that was it was offensive to some members. And so what we had done to address that is our club actually had like a little code of ethics. And so in the following meeting, we revisited the code of ethics, and it's nothing earth-shattering. It's basically, I think comes from Toastmasters International, but it was just kind of a reminder, folks, that, the words that we use, we don't want to offend any people. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard that, but that was something that our club had done, actually, was took a minute and just talked about, let's just level set, reminder, folks, we're here to have fun, but we also have to temper that.
Yeah, I will go along with that. I think that we all at a gut level know what's in good taste and what isn't. I think we know that. I mean, and if you're coming up to against what you think might be good taste, I would say just be your own self-centered. Go for something else. Go to a different direction. For example, I don't curse when I speak, ever, in front of a group. I just don't. That's not my style. Other people do that. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying I don't. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't tell raunchy sexual material ever. I just don't, because that's not what I want to come across as. We all know what our own personal values are. And if we reflect those values when we speak, we're going to be okay. I think that our internal censor is more important than any external censor.
Luisa, anything to add? Or I'll just. And as for everyone in the audience, oh, go ahead, Luisa.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, dear.
I was just going to tell everyone, if anyone wants to ask a question, please leave it in the chat or raise your hand or something so that we can get that in the queue. All right, go ahead, Luisa.
Thank you. There are three things they say that you shouldn't discuss, and that's politics, sex, and religion. And I know that 2 or 3 times in speeches I've given, I will say something. I said, well, I was talking to my God the other day. Now, see, by saying that, I have put religion into context. Now, a lot of people might not believe in God. You could have some atheists in the crowd. You just never know. They could be Buddhists. So when I say God, and this is how I introduce it. So I'll be giving my speech. And I said, I was talking to my God the other day. Oh, and I say my God because I don't want to offend some of you. And everybody usually nods. And then I say, I want to offend all of you. And then everyone laughs. And so when everyone laughs, see, now what I've done is I've opened the door to be able to talk about my God, because I have gone and put it, and I said, okay, look, some of you might not believe in God. I don't want to offend some of you. I want to offend all of you. So now I've opened it with a joke. Everybody relaxes, and then it's okay. But had I just said, I believe that God, if I say that right away, I might have lost part of my audience, and I don't want to do that. And I realize that that's a sensitive subject. So what I do is I go ahead and open the door by making it a joke, making it okay. And then everybody relaxes. Oh, well, she said this or she said that. That was funny, whatever. So when you're going to talk about a sensitive subject, you might want to open it with some kind of humor or allowance for your audience to accept what you're about to say. And that's my take on that. Thank you.
It's great. I like the idea of having a disarming joke that way. All right. I don't see any questions from the audience yet. So another question anticipating what some Toastmasters might not appreciate or about humor, something that scares them off from it, is they say, I'm not funny. I don't have any idea how to be funny. I've never been funny. Why should I try now if it's not going to work? I sat down and tried to be funny and nothing came to me. So I wanted to ask all of you maybe a little about your writing process. What percentage of jokes that you write actually make the final cut? And what do you say to someone who says, I'm not funny?
I've heard that so many times. I don't think of myself as being funny because I have to work at it. I have to stop and think. There are formulas. If you study humor, there are books that are written that give you formulas and word lists and then mixing word lists and things like that. I think for me, what works for me is that I will daydream sometimes, and I'll just let my mind wander and funny things will come to mind. Now, that sounds kind of like a cop-out maybe, because it doesn't come easily, but humor, I believe, is something that can be learned. And that's why I like what David Brooks says. You write everything down, because when you write it, then you can edit it and add the humor. And along the same lines, I would say, write your speech and then add the humor. Don't take a joke and try and put your speech around that joke. So the content of your speech should come first, or the content of your Toastmaster meeting should come first, and then look for opportunities to insert jokes.
Brian, it's so interesting that you're mentioning this about people saying they aren't funny. That happened to me with a new speech writing client yesterday afternoon. He said, I am not funny. My wife tells me I'm not funny. I don't want to try to do that. Well, having spent now several hours with him on the phone, I agree he's not funny. But here's how it can work. Humor for people who don't feel like they can tell jokes. See, I can write jokes, but I'm not a joke teller. I'm a storyteller. I love to do stories with humor in them. And that can work for people that don't consider themselves typically funny. They can tell a story in which they might even be the butt of the joke. Tell a funny story about something that really happened with humor in the story. And that's very different from telling a joke. Once you help them realize that the story will work for them, they don't have to worry about being funny and being jokey like other people might think. Stories, and I think David Brooks is very big on this, stories are the key. Tell a story, make a point, and often you have great humor in the story, which I think is better than a joke, which probably didn't even happen, and it may not be original to you. I love stories, and I love stories where I can kid myself.
Looks like, is that Luisa wanting to say something? Yeah, okay.
People have often approached me and they say, you know what, I've got a speech. I need to put humor into it. I'm not funny. What can I do? What I've done, and the thing is, I've got such a great, intricate group of friends, and I'll take my speech and I'll say, okay, you guys, I'm trying to make this funny. So I'll read my speech, and while I'll give 2 or 3 lines of my speech, somebody will say, oh, whatever. and they'll put in something funny. And I'll say, oh my gosh, that's great. Can I use that? Absolutely. Because if you feel you're not funny, what you're going to do is rely on getting humor from others. So take your speech, it's written out, then tell your audience, look, how can I make this funny? And people will start to brainstorm, and 10 minds is better than one mind. So now you've got people interjecting. Now, what you have to realize is you don't have to take everybody's idea and infuse it into your speech. You take what you think might be funny and add that. Or now what it's done is it has your mind thinking, how can I make this funny? Because if you go to your friends or your family and say, hey, I want to make this funny, how can I do that? And your little 3-year-old says, you know, put marker on your face. And you're thinking, no, that's stupid. I can come up with something funnier than that. Well, you see what you're doing now. What you're doing now is you're trying to come up with something that's going to be funny. And worst comes to worst, put marker on your face. You know, what do you have to lose? With this, I just want to interject here real quick. And I don't think Jim knows this, but my mother was a district manager for Avon.
Oh, wow.
And she went to the Atlanta conference with Bob Hope, and I drove that Chevy Chevette anytime that she gave me the keys. So just wanted to let you know that.
That makes my entire day. Oh, I love that.
Just wanted you to know that. I think she actually has a picture with Bob Hope. So yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
A great last minute revelation.
I have one more comment, Brian. I just thought of it. Back when I was writing jokes for Joan Rivers, I was a starving actor, and I was a waiter at the club where she performed regularly, and she used it as a tryout club because it only seated 60 or 70 people. And she would do her regular act, and she would also put new material. She'd try it out in front of this group. And I can still see her. She would walk in. She had one of those old cassette recorders. She'd put the cassette on the piano, turn it on, turn around, give her act. Then when it was over, she shut it off, took it under her arm, went home, and she would capture the ad libs or the new material she did that night. And then she would keep the ones that worked, eliminate the ones that didn't work. And then that way she kept building material by trying it out in front of the small group and taking the wheat from the chaff and keeping the good stuff. And she did that over and over and over. She was one of the hardest working people I ever knew. She was incredibly disciplined, and she never stopped adding to her material.
That's great. Recording one's performances and trying them out on smaller audiences is always a great approach. We are at time for sure now. So thanks to everyone. Thank you to our panelists, Rich, Luisa, and Jim. Thank you to all of you for coming. I hope you learned something. I hope you laughed. I know I did. Please, I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.